Upon purchasing a small Victorian home in 2004, an initial priority was to transform the rundown, weed-infested yard into a private haven, complete with rose garden and country club turf lawn. I began composting early on to support a small vegetable garden consisting of mainly tomatoes and herbs, but the lush green grass was my pride and joy. After adoring the beautiful space for a number of years, my priorities began to shift. Not only did I grow tired of the continual maintenance and tedious upkeep, but I became increasingly frustrated with the enormous amounts of water and chemical fertilizers necessary to keep things looking nice and green in the arid Rocky Mountain climate. So, early last winter I began reading books about organic and bio-intensive mini-farming. Already an avid Italian-inspired chef, I wanted to support my desire for an abundance of locally grown, fresh, pesticide-free produce. As a budding environmentalist and locavore, I became determined to use my land as efficiently as possible, while increasing the fertility of my soil rather than continually degrading the environment with chemicals and unnecessarily wasting precious resources. I was guided by Ecology Action and their Grow Bio-intensive approach to mini-farming, which uses small-scale, organic, non-mechanized food-raising techniques to promote abundance and sustainability. Using their method, gardeners use drastically less water, less energy, and no added fertilizer, while increasing yields considerably, building soil fertility, and creating a healthy, sustainable mini-ecosystem. To limit the amount of natural resources required and to automate the growing process, I drafted plans to install a rainwater harvesting system. Over the course of a few weekends, I built a platform capable of capturing 110 gallons of clean rainwater that feeds a gravity drip irrigation system controlled by an automatic timer. The energy and resource-free system waters my 125 square foot fruit, vegetable, and herb growing area, even if I'm gone for weeks at a time. Organic gardening requires rich, fertile soil, so I allocated over 2/3 of total growing space to plant green manure compost crops. I designed and built a garden comprised of 4 deep-dug raised beds and a brick herb planter built from repurposed aged bricks and flagstone. For my rainwater harvesting system, I built a 5-foot-tall platform, which supplies around 2 to 2.5 pounds per square inch of pressure. To start, I built a basic foundation capable of supporting the roughly 850 pounds of lumber, barrels, and water. I then built a solid platform out of 4x4s and 2x2s. I installed a switch to turn the system on and off the downspout, and designed a first flush filter to remove debris before it has a chance to enter the tanks. A plug at the bottom drains the filter. Once the first flush fills and debris drops to the bottom, the accumulated water rises and flows to enter the first tank. I used 2 food-grade 55-gallon barrels, sourced for $10 each on Craigslist. An inline connection between the tanks fills both at once, allowing for the greatest continual water pressure to the outlet valve. I used a 1-inch pipe tap to create female threads in the bottom of each tank, and attached 1-inch PVC male threads to 1-inch piping with silicone glue for a watertight seal. The barrels are closed to prevent any debris from entering or promoting mosquito breeding grounds. I installed overflow pipes to flush excess water after the tanks fill. I built the PVC piping into the platform structure for strength and a clean design. A 1-inch ball valve controls the flow of water. The ball valve is first connected to an automatic timer that works regardless of water pressure, which flows into a 200 mesh T filter and then into poly tubing. Finally, I tap the barrel to insert a nozzle to fill a watering can, as well as a clear tube gauge showing the fill level in gallons. The poly tubing flows down under the flagstone and off to each of the 4 raised beds in the brick planter. Aside from 2 AA batteries to control the auto timer, the system requires absolutely no energy as it works entirely based on gravity. At the end of each of the garden beds, I installed a T-bend connected to poly tubing and a ball valve to separately control the flow of water to each bed. To complete the system, I installed low-flow rain barrel soaker hose that's made of 100% recycled tires. Rainwater is clean and chlorine-free. The timer allows me to water small amounts multiple times a day, even when I'm not at home. It provides a slow and constant trickle of water directly to the base of the plants and roots. Also, it prevents evaporation and limits the amount of water needed. My next task involved building the raised beds. Although a wooden border isn't necessary for raised bed gardening, I wanted it to look good as well as be functional. I used untreated cedar, notching the plank ends and pinning them together with steel rods. I didn't use pressure-treated lumber as it contains toxic chemicals. I dug up my formerly prized Kentucky bluegrass and set it aside. I dug down 2 feet deep, removing roots and rocks. Digging out each bed took between 4 and 6 hours. I spaced the beds far enough apart to fit a small wheelbarrow and situated them to maximize the sunlight. I made a trip out to a farm and acquired over a ton of free horse manure via Craigslist. When building the beds back up, I buried the sod and added layers of soil, horse manure, compost, and peat moss. I laid the drip hose and connected it to the irrigation system. Raised bed gardening offers many advantages. As the beds need to be filled, it's easy to control the soil conditions by amending with compost and peat moss. The loose growing medium allows for intensive planting. The roots can easily grow straight down instead of horizontally competing for space. This results in much higher yields in a smaller area. Also, intensive planting crowds out the garden, so there's practically no weeding involved. The raised beds warm up faster, expanding the grow season by a week or two and promoting overall faster growth. Maintenance is made easier as there's less bending over to plant, mulch, and harvest. Better drainage improves root development and allows higher control of watering. Finally, raised bed gardening offers a clean, attractive design. I decided to reuse some old bricks to build an herb planter. I dug down 8 inches and leveled the surface based on the size of my plants. I mixed and poured a concrete foundation, ensuring it was level and square all around. I built up each course by applying mortar on top of and in between each brick. I left multiple drainage spaces on the sides of the bottom rows and a space to install the drip irrigation hose. I built up the rest of the planter, continually ensuring it was level, square, and true. I left roughly 1 inch between the planter and the wall and installed folded metal flashing a row from the top, which I sealed against the wall to prevent any water from entering the space. I laid a final row of bricks on top of the flashing. I used a hammer and a chisel, and I cut a clean row of flagstones to serve as the capstones for the planter. I cut 45-degree angles to frame out the corners nicely, and mortared it all into place. Every aspect of my garden was a tremendous success and yielded enormous amounts of organic, fresh produce. The rainwater harvesting system worked perfectly, and my dank compost created a rich, fertile growing medium. Here's a time-lapse from May 15th to August 1st. I started the majority of my plants indoors in the spring, then transplanted them outside based on the tolerance of each variety. All told, I planted 43 varieties of fruits, vegetables, and herbs. Additionally, I planted a dozen types of compost crops, including vetch, rye, wheat, fava beans, blue lupine, and others. My most productive plants were the San Marzano tomatoes. I yielded over 115 pounds, which were eaten, sauced, and canned. I made a few mistakes along the way, but learned a great deal about using resources efficiently and growing a great deal of food without any added pesticides nor chemicals. Now that the work of building the garden is complete, next year's garden will be easier and even more productive. I hope my experience has been educational and that everyone uses their own backyard to grow food that is good for the health of your body and the environment.